Helix Spindle Hub turned gently in the dark, a ring of light and habitat spokes wrapped around a central axis. From a distance it looked serene. Up close, it was loud, crowded, and tired. In the emergency wing, where metal walls were painted a calming blue stripe, Dr. Leina Park peeled off bloody gloves and stared at the Q counter on the wall. 11 critical, 18 moderate, 32 minor, Nurse Alamide Farrow said quietly. At 3 p.m. station time. Leina flexed stiff fingers. We're gaining on it, she said, as long as nothing else tears open. The station chose that moment to shudder. The lights flickered. A rising, teeth-hurting wail rolled down every corridor, hull breach. On the central display, docking spoke H9 flashed red. Icons showed a freighter off vector, colliding with the cargo structure. Rafael Juric, captain of the ISS Kindred Promise, was already moving before the alarms finished their first cycle. He stepped into the emergency wing, ducked a running medic, and locked eyes with Leina. How bad? He said. Bad enough, she answered, watching casualty estimates climb. We'll know in 5 minutes. Juric to Kindred Promise, he said into his wristcom. All med-capable shuttles scramble, coordinate with Helix Ops. We're taking overflow from H9. The first stretchers arrived sooner than that. The station's evac bots and emergency crews did their work fast. On one of the stretchers lay a small Serathi child. Their species had long, narrow faces, smooth, luminescent skin, and elaborate, multi-layered eyes adapted for underwater light. The child's eyes were gone. The entire orbital region was blackened and torn. Leina met them at the bay doors. A Serathi adult Asera hovered nearby, their tendrils quivering. What's their name? Leina asked, keeping her voice steady. Pelix, Asera said. Their bioluminescent patterns were dim with shock. Pelix tried to speak, but only a choked sound came out. They groped blindly, hand catching on Leina's sleeve. Easy, Leina murmured. We've got you. They stabilized Pelix quickly, fluids, analgesics, a field around the ravaged sockets. The scans came back within minutes, floating in the air above the bed. Optic nerves charred, orbital tissue shredded, no native structures left to salvage. Asera watched Leina's face. Tell me, Asera whispered. Leina's throat felt tight. The original eyes are gone, she said. We can craft synthetic receptors that will give a form of sight, but I know Serathi doctrine on artificial organs. Asera flinched. Among Serathi, better blind than altered was more than a saying. It was law and prayer. Pelix pulled at the bandages. Why is it dark? They whispered. Mama, why is it dark? Because the world is cruel, Asera thought and could not say it aloud. Leina stared at the scan again. Another voice inside her, older than she was, whispered options she had been taught and told never to use without permission. She had eyes. They were a matched pair, healthy, compatible with a wide array of neural designs if you had enough nanomeds and nerve splicing expertise. She also had access to the still experimental shared vision protocol, the Solark outreach project to standardize cross-species sensory grafts. Time, however, she did not have. The longer Pelix's optic nerves sat dead, the less chance any graft had. Alamide, she said, if I could get fresh, compatible tissue into those sockets in under an hour with nanosequencer support, what are our odds? Alamide's eyes widened. If you mean what I think you mean, just answer. He hesitated, calculating. Better than 80% for initial take. Long-term depends on immune response, neural plasticity, cultural fallout. Cultural fallout is my problem, Leina said. Turn to Asera. Serathi forbids synthetics, she said, but what about living donors? There are no volunteers, Asera whispered. No Serathi would give up their eyes while alive, and even if someone did, they would be declared soulless. I didn't say Serathi, Leina said. Asera stared. You would. They could not finish the sentence. Leina's pulse hammered in her ears. She thought of human intensive care wards back home, of transplant waiting lists, of organ donor cards signed without fanfare. She thought of all the times medicine had let her keep her own body intact while she cut into someone else's. It's not complicated, she said. Pelix needs a pair of eyes now. I have a pair I can live without for a while. We grow me new ones with the protocol. Alamide whispered. Leina, we don't have licensed replacements ready, he added aloud. The hybrid prototypes are on the bench, not in production. We've grown functional photoreceptors in lab animals, Leina said. and accelerate a trial. They'll be clumsy at first, but good enough, and we don't have to tell the ethics board until after it works. That is not how ethics boards work, Alamide muttered. Asera's tendrils quaked. This would make Pelix altered, they said. There are words for such beings in Serathi shrines, none of them kind. Your child will see, Leina said. Or stay blind to satisfy people who weren't there when hull plating sliced through this bay. Pelix clung to Leina's hand. Are you afraid? They asked. Yes, Leina said. Very, but my fear doesn't matter as much as your whole life. Pelix tried to imagine a whole life in darkness. They had grown up in a reef city where light played through water, where stories were told in colors as well as sound. I don't want the dark, they whispered. Asera's thoughts churned. Ancestors, proverbs, the contempt of elders, the small, warm weight of Pelix's hand on their arm. Serathi tradition said refusing a freely offered, costly gift was dishonorable. It also said mixing flesh between species polluted the soul. Both could not be obeyed at once. I accept, Asera said hoarsely. Do it, please. The override for experimental procedures sat deep in Helix Hub's regulations. Access required rank. Leina did not have it. Rafael did. He arrived halfway through the argument with Station Med. The administrators' faces filled the wall display, some appalled, some strangely fascinated. You can't cut out your own eyes, one Helix doctor said. Dr. Park, this is rash, unnecessary. Rafael listened long enough to confirm that yes, everyone was saying what he expected, then raised his hand. Under Solarc Outreach Charter Clause 8.3, he said, I can authorize experimental interventions when a patient's essential function is at imminent risk and no culturally acceptable alternative exists. Serathi doctrine refuses synthetic organs. This is the only path they'll accept. A child's life and sight are on the line. Juric, this is medical theater, a Yalori surgeon snapped. Maybe, Rafael said, but it's also within the letter of our joint treaty. He could hear Charat in his head already, accusing humans of buying hearts with organs. This gift, living and bloody, could become a diplomatic firestorm. It could also become a precedent that made the next emergency easier. He looked at Pelix, pale and bandaged, at Asera's shaking tendrils, at Leina's set jaw. He signed the authorization. Make it count, he told Leina. If you're going to rewrite the rules, do it right. The surgery was quick by necessity and brutal in concept. Anesthetics ensured Leina did not feel the cut when microblades eased into her orbital rims. Light winked out for her in a smooth, absolute fade. When she surfaced from anesthesia, she floated in darkness. Leina, Rafael's voice, can you hear me? Unfortunately, she rasped. Pelix, a small laugh answered her, wet with tears but real. I can see, Pelix whispered. It's strange. The light is sharp. The colors, the white of that wall has pieces inside it. She imagined her old eyes now grafted into that small face, their biochemistry bent by the nanosequencer to like Serathi blood. Pain, she asked. A little, but I see Asera, I see the blue stripe. I see you even though you're wrapped up. Leina exhaled, feeling tears she could not see. Then it was worth it, she said. News outraced the ship that had carried the freighter's cargo. In the busy, gossip-thick air of Helix, the story of the human doctor who surrendered her sight to a stranger's child rippled outward, picking up embellishments as it went. To some, it was horrifying. A Serathi elder went on record calling the act a mutilation that drags a child across species boundaries without consent. Others could not quite look away. Yalori commentators dissected the decision. Was it altruism, cultural propaganda, or a dangerously flexible view of bodily integrity? Rizkan of the Cathari watched the footage of Pelix's bandages coming off and felt something shift. Cathari bodies were sheathed in carapace and clan markings. They had a rich tradition of limb replacement with printed chitin, but flesh was another matter. Yet here was a human, smiling blindly as a child with her donated eyes laughed. Rizkan sent a brief message to Rafael Juric. We must talk parameters, before someone shadier does. While she healed, Leina became a symbol whether she wanted it or not. Post-surgery, grafted, she learned the quirks of her new hybrid eyes. Bioluminescent markings on Serathi skin flared brighter. Vemery glowed subtly in her perception, their electromagnetic fields tingling at the edges of her vision. She could see stress fractures in metal as faint discolorations. Petra Kavarik, Kindred Promise's chief engineer, hovered nearby with quiet excitement. Senseweave stub is live, Petra told her. We're routing your visual feed into a small test network, see how well the hardware handles it. Let me enjoy my own vision for 5 minutes, Leina said dryly. Then you can plug me into your machines. Irixa of the Vemery sought her out soon after arriving. They floated beside her bed, their translucent fins rippling. You parted from your own eyes, Irixa said. You humans are loose with your bodies. We think of them as tools, Leina replied. Important but not sacred. Yet you cringe at others' pain, Irixa murmured. You will tear your flesh for a child, but you still treat suffering as a private thing. You do not yet know how to let many minds hold a wound together. We're working on it, Leina said, thinking of the experimental Senseweave. Careful sharing of data, empathy. Not data, Irixa said. Sensation. One day you will see not just through your own eyes, but through ours as well. You will be less lonely then. Their patterns dimmed thoughtfully. And less separate. Far out in trade lanes and on mining colonies, something vile and tiny moved in unnoticed cargo in recycled water in the air. A Cathari miner woke one shift to silence. His world had always been vibration and hum, drills, pumps, the subtle song of stress in rock. Now it muted to a dull thud. At first he thought it was an equipment fault. Then his crewmate tapped his shoulder, lips moving, no sound. A Serathi Reef City teacher lifted her head to watch the class scramble in the morning light and saw their colors warp. The bright blues and greens bled into a glossy, iridescent film. Minutes later, her vision collapsed entirely. Reports filtered into Helix as anomalies, clusters of unexplained sensory failure. A few cases could be chalked up to industrial accidents, poor shielding, localized toxins. Dozens could not. In Helix's labs, analysts stained neural tissue and stared at the results. Tiny, intricate structures clung to sensory pathways, too regular to be natural, too adaptive to be simple machines. They replicated slowly, lacing themselves into the wiring of sight, hearing, balance, field sense. They named it the Gildshade Plague, after the faint shimmer it produced in affected perception before senses dimmed. Gildshade was clever. It had templates for Serathi visual cortex arrangements, Yalori motion tracking, Cathari vibrational sense, Vemery electromagnetic fields. It attacked those systems with ruthless efficiency. Victims did not bleed. They walked into walls, crashed ships, drifted off platforms, trapped in intact bodies that no longer connected properly to the world. On Helix, the first wave hit an older Cathari clerk. He staggered in from the promenade, antennae twitching helplessly. I can't hear the deck, he said, panic cracking his voice. The world's gone flat. In adjacent bays, Vemery dockhands complained of wrongness in the background song. Their navigation went off by just enough for accidents. Doctors scrambled. Antivirals did nothing. Antibiotics, nanofilters, immunoboosters, nothing. Neural scans came back with those same dark, lacy deposits hugging sensory pathways. Then the data models showed something interesting. On a Serathi reef colony, Gildshade hit hard. Almost everyone under a certain age lost sight within a week. Almost. A handful of children did not. Every one of those children had previous neural augmentations or weird histories with their senses. A half-healed injury compensated for with prosthetics. A minor graft from another species. Experimental implants. On a Vemery drift, a technician with an old human-made sonar patch remained partially functional after their peers went blind to M fields. On a Cathari station, an engineer with redundant ear repairs recovered faster. And on Helix, Pelix watched fellow Serathi stumble and go dark while their own vision stayed clear. Leina noticed. Check hybrid cases, she said, jabbing a finger at the data wall. Cross-reference Gildshade severity with any record of cross-species grafts or sensory implants. Within hours, the pattern sharpened. Where senses had been edited, patched, or extended, Gildshade's sabotage faltered. It's like a lockpick designed for clean keyholes, Petra said, staring at the matrices. When it hits something with extra grooves and scratches, it slips. We have noise, Alamide said. Evolutionary noise, surgical noise. Mess, Leina said. We have mess. It's saving us. Humans, with their long history of patchwork medicine and hobbyist biohacks, were statistically more resistant than any species their size had any right to be. Gildshade could still hurt them, but its scripts sometimes misfired on the jumbled wiring. In an emergency gathering under Helix's central dome, representatives shouted, argued, and glared as the holographic Gildshade model turned slowly over the floor. "Your solution," a Serathi elder said to Leina, "is to make all of us messy. To deliberately taint our bodies," a Cathari asked, scandalized. "To alter our very sensory architecture," a Yalori counselor added. "Yes," Leina said. "In controlled ways, Gildshade expects uniformity. We rob it of that. The more individualized our neural layouts, the less it can spread." Juric raised two arms. "Even if what you say is true," he said, "look at the power imbalance it creates. The species with the expertise and donor pools will decide who lives and who alters. Today you humans say you ask for nothing. Tomorrow some administration may demand concessions." Rizkan clicked his mandibles softly. "Better to write the rules now," he said, "than cede them to those who don't mind leverage." He projected draft language: voluntary donation and reception, prohibition of coercion, protected privacy within a shared sense network. "The Giftbound Accord," he said. "We give, we receive, but we do not compel." Rafael studied the text. He saw gaps, potential loopholes. He also saw a scaffolding that could be strengthened. "Human signatories will insist on explicit rights," he said. "No one loses their job, home, or citizenship for refusing a graft. No command can order a soldier to carve up their body as long as they're on the payroll." Juric's mind did not stop there. "And if another crisis comes where hybridization is the only path," he asked, "do we ban mandates then as well, even if worlds hang in the balance?" "You can't build a stable future on forced martyrdom," Rafael said. "We tried that in smaller ways on Earth. It always ends in rebellion." Pelix had been sitting near the back of the hall as living proof of hybridization. With Leina's old eyes in their face, they saw the rows of counselors, some fascinated, some repulsed. When Leina's arguments and Rizkan's clauses stalled against fear, Pelix stood. "May I speak?" they asked. The chamber quieted. Even the translators seemed to hesitate. "I was blind," Pelix said. "Once, for a little while, it was like being buried. I would have taken any eyes to get out. I ended up with human ones. They touched their own eyelids. Some of my people call me unclean now," they went on. "Not to my face, but I hear it. They say my soul has been pulled sideways, but I laugh at the same jokes, I like the same foods, I still think in our language when I'm scared, I'm still Pelix." They swallowed. "The only difference is that I can see more human hallways, their signs, the way their faces move when they talk. If that is contamination, it feels like being given extra colors, not losing my own." Silence held. Nadim Gali caught all of it on his recorder. The bare, frightened honesty in Pelix's voice, the way some council members shifted, looking anywhere but at the child. When he uploaded the clip with a plain caption, "Still myself, just with more ways to understand you," it spread across the Solarc outreach feeds and beyond. Humans, watching from distant ships and worlds, recognized themselves in the story. Heart donors, transplant lists, prosthetic limbs. They commented, shared, argued. A new, simple pledge started appearing under the video. "If someone needs a sense and I can give part of mine, I will." On Helix, triage wards became recruitment halls. A Serathi teen came in, asking about a small auditory crossbatch to Cathari frequency ranges, just in case. A human engineer volunteered a cochlear stub to a Vemery who'd lost field sense. Tajan, the Cathari security officer, offered his redundant tactile nodes. The Senseweave Network, originally a cautious data link between medical teams, scaled up almost overnight. Petra rerouted power. Adults and youth alike helped to string new nodes through corridors and junctions, and Irixa coaxed Vemery healers into lending their songs to calm panicked donors. The first large-scale hybridization wave was messy. Some grafts failed and had to be reversed. Others produced unexpected side effects. A Yalori with a Vemery sense node behind one ear complained of constant static for days until their brain adapted. An Alland child given a Serathi light patch on their membrane giggled uncontrollably the first time they experienced sunlight as more than warmth. Every successful modification made it a little harder for Gildshade to find a simple path. Outside Helix, station after station faced a choice. Some embraced the program. Others refused on doctrinal grounds and fell silent. Those silences haunted everyone on Helix. They were pushed further into the background when sabotage struck close. In a cramped cargo bay near the Emberwall Grid's Junction B, a group of Cathari traditionalists met in secret. Their faces were hidden behind ceremonial masks etched with clan crests faded by time. "We are becoming something else," one hissed. "Look at our young. Patches, implants, foreign flesh. If we let this web complete, we won't know where Cathari ends and human begins." "Gildshade burns away the weak," another said. "If we cripple this grid, let the plague in, we can start over somewhere else. Pure." Tajan, originally invited to sympathize, felt his antennae flatten in disbelief. "You would slaughter thousands," he said, "to avoid admitting that gifts from others have value." "Slaughter," the ringleader said. "The plague chooses. We simply open the door." Tajan left that room with his mind made and his loyalties shifted. He reported to Helix Security to Cherat, and finally shame and resolve warring to Rafael. "They will target the junctions where Emberwall is most vital," Tajan said. "They think they are surgeons cutting out rot. They are butchers." Despite increased patrols, some of the saboteurs slipped through. They knew Cathari maintenance schedules, mapping weekly monitored stretches of conduit. Explosions rocked the station in the false night of 2 a.m. station time. Alarms screamed, not just the shrill of hull breach but the crackle of internal systems failing. On the Emberwall control screens, a jagged gap appeared in the shimmering lattice around Helix. A Gildshade cloud, previously held at bay, surged toward the opening, drawn by pressure differences and the promise of new neural templates. "We've lost 3 nodes," Petra said, fingers flying over controls. "I can reroute around 2, but Junction B is offline." "Start evacuating the spokes closest to the breach," Helix Ops shouted. "If Gildshade gets into the ventilation—" "It's already in the ventilation," Leina said, watching a faint shimmer seep along the atmospheric feed in her abnormal vision. To her, Gildshade was barely visible, an oily ripple in the air. To everyone else, it was nothing. "We need those charges disarmed," Rafael said. "If the rest go, Emberwall will collapse like a net with its center cut." The only access to the worst damaged junctions ran through narrow service ducts meant for small techs and drones. Cathari squads could not squeeze through. Vemery were too large in span. Humans, Yalori, and a few slender Serathi could. "Junction B, D, and C," Petra said, bringing up schematics. "Bombs at the control spines. Any more and the grid will drop." Rafael grabbed a suit and helmet. Leina caught his arm. "You should be in command," she said. "I can talk over comms from a crawlspace," he replied. "There isn't time to assign a risk-free hero." She saw fear beneath his practical tone and the determination over it, recognized something she had seen in herself before, a surgery that would change a life. "We'll need more than your eyes," she said quietly. She tapped the behind-ear patch where some weeks earlier he had let Irixa attach a small Vemery electrosense nub. It buzzed faintly whenever he passed live wiring. "Senseweave tie-in," Petra said. "We can overlay his local field readings with Leina's vision and some automation. 2 brains, 3 sensing modalities. That might be enough." Leina sat at Emberwall's central console, plugged into a quickly extended Senseweave harness. Her hybrid eyes drank the data from node feeds and real-world viewports. Overlaid, pale afterimages of Rafael's crawlspace view flickered at the edges of her perception as his suit camera piped in. Outside, the Gildshade cloud brushed Emberwall's gap, recoiling where the lattice still burned, slipping through where it could. "Raf, 12 meters ahead," Leina said. "Bomb 1 is around the next bend. Your implant's reading a steady current. I'm seeing a faint heat halo." Rafael grunted as he pushed along the duct. It was cramped enough that his shoulders scraped on conduit casings. Sweat slid down his spine. "Why do the worst ducts always smell like old socks?" he muttered. "Focus," she said, eyeing the glowing threads over his camera feed. "When you get there, don't touch anything until I say." While he crawled, another emergency ignited. Pelix and Nadim, along with a few volunteers, were in a low-grav ring stocked as an island shelter when backup sirens began a different pattern, short, frantic pulses. The sterilization cycle, Nadim realized, staring at the blinking panels. They're about to flood this whole ring to burn out Gildshade. Everyone. Pelix asked, looking at the cluster of Island children bobbing nervously near the ceiling. If Emberwall's gap lets spores in, the system isolates vulnerable sectors, Nadim said. He hammered the door control. The emergency shutter was halfway closed, jammed on something. If we don't clear this, the sterilizer will treat this whole space as contaminated hardware, not people. Pelix glanced between the quivering island and the jammed door. Through the half-gap they could see the corridor, a faint shimmer in the air, Gildshade creeping in delicate eddies. Nadim, Leina's voice came faintly through the Senseweave link they all wore now, a thin thread around each wrist or temple. Where are you? Alan's shelter, ring 11, he said. Door jammed, sterilizer countdown running. Alan kids and us inside. Leina's view of Gildshade showed it feathering the air around ring 11. If Emberwall fired a full pulse through that section while the door was partly open, the sterilization energy would cook the living as efficiently as the moats. You'll have to clear the jam from the contaminated side, she said, calculation quick and cold. I'm too big, Nadim said, staring at the narrow gap. I'll never fit. Pelix's throat tightened. The gap looked about their size. Gildshade glowed dimly in Leina's vision all around it. I can, Pelix said. Asera's voice crackled over a distant channel, frantic. Pelix shut their eyes for a heartbeat. Darkness. The memory of the earlier dark, dense and permanent. Then light strange but welcome from human eyes. If Leina could give hers, Pelix thought, I can risk mine. They wriggled forward. Pelix, wait, Nadim started, then caught their ankle gently. We'll do it together. I'll push from this side. Leina's focus split. Rafael in the ducts, Pelix in the ring, Gildshade currents swirling around them. Pelix, she said, listen carefully. The jam is a maintenance panel lodged in the shutter track. It's above your head right of center. Get your fingers under it and pull down. Nadim, on my mark, you'll shove your weight against the door to help. Pelix slid through the gap, metal scraping their back. The air tasted strange, like stale copper. Their human eyes watered as Gildshade shone to them in faint, oily patterns. I see it, they whispered. The panel was twisted, wedged hard. Count of 3, Leina said, intimately aware that the sterilization system's own countdown was nearing its last moments. 1, 2, 3, Pelix yanked. Nadim shoved. The panel tore free with a grating shriek that vibrated through Pelix's hands. The door snapped down with a heavy clang, sealing the shelter. Closed, Nadim gasped. Firing, the Emberwall operator shouted. Energy surged through Ring 11's walls. In Pelix's vision, Gildshade flared in violent color and then dissolved into fine, dead dust. They slumped on the floor, hands bleeding from sharp edges. Island children bobbed low, brushing them with soft membranes in thanks. Nadim laughed shakily, hugging an island with one arm and Pelix with the other. Back in the ducts, Rafael reached the first bomb. It was crude, repurposed mining charges strapped to a structural rib. 3 leads, standard detonator, Petra's voice buzzed through his comm. If we had 5 minutes, I could walk you through a full disarm. Do I have 5 minutes? He asked. You have maybe 30 seconds before the redundancy chain kicks in, Leina said, reading spike patterns through his implant. The memory node behind his ear hummed. Through it, faint differential currents ran along the wires. Senseweave translated some of that into visual ghost lines for Leina, who overlaid them on Rafael's feed. Second from the left, she said. That one's carrying active trigger current. Cut it, fast. Rafael trusted her more than he trusted the training simulations he'd run in younger, dumber years. He sliced. The small status light blinked once, then went dark. The timer froze. Bomb 1 down, he said. Next. By the time he reached the last device, his muscles burned and helmet scraped skin raw at the neck. Leina's world narrowed to shimmering motes and flashing junction readouts. She saw Gildshade pressing against the patched Emberwall, seeking new cracks. She saw hybrid populations across the hub, people with grafts and implants, still functional enough to move, to help. She saw pure populations already slumped, senses severed. Raf, she said, voice hoarse. This last one's wired into a ventilation control. If it goes, Gildshade will ride the pressure wave straight into Central. Then it's not going to go, he said through gritted teeth. Leina caught the faintest change in current flow through his implant, matched it with a glimmer around a particular wire. "That one," she said. "Don't argue, he didn't." The last charge went inert. On Emberwall screens, the gap shrank as replacement nodes flickered online. The Gildshade plume, unsettled by pulses and blocked doors, thinned. Outside Helix, coordinated Senseweave-controlled sterilization runs and hybridized populations had already begun to push infection rates down. The station's successful defense turned what might have been a last stand into a turning point. Over the following months, Gildshade lost, not to a single miracle drug, but to a galaxy that refused to present it with simple targets. Where sensory systems had become one-shape-fits-all, Gildshade had thrived. Where they were patched, messy, proudly altered, it faltered. Helix survived, changed. In the aftermath, corridors filled with people learning the quirks of altered perception. Cathari with human tactile graphs stopped tripping over microstair height changes. Humans with memory implants shyly admitted they could now feel when power lines were overloaded. Serathi with faint human auditory patches startled, then laughed at the range of tones they'd never noticed before. The Giftbound Accord rushed into being under crisis, hardened into a lasting agreement. Worlds that had never imagined authorizing cross-species organ donation now maintained registries of volunteers. That registry was guarded more fiercely than any treasury. On Talaris Prime, under a slanting golden sun, a modest ceremony honored those who had given or received. It was not grand. No marching bands, no flyovers. Just a circular plaza, a low stage, a mixed-species crowd. On that stage, a young Olin drifted forward, translucent membrane catching the evening light. "I was born during the Gildshade time," they said, voice rendered in clear human common through the translator. "I don't remember a sky without sterilization pulses. I also don't remember a time when we didn't have others' senses patching ours." They bobbed once, nervous. "I have more electrosense nodules than I need. My species evolved them for wind tunnels we no longer live in. There is a human child over there with damaged balance. I want to give him some of mine so he can feel currents like I do, so he can stand." A murmur rolled through the crowd. The human boy on crutches flushed, surprised and shy. A facilitator checked consent on both sides, made sure the island understood the risks, that the human boy's caregivers were informed. No one invoked duty. No one implied obligation. It was as simple and serious as signing a donor card. When they were done, a Serathi stepped up, fingertips glowing. "My chromatophore patches can be split," she said. "I offer some to that human singer," she pointed, "so her skin can glow with her music." A Cathari followed, antennae steady. "I have more tactile nodes than any one person uses," he said. "I give a few to that Yalori child who stumbles on uneven ground." The line grew. Not everyone reached the front that day. Not every offer translated into a graft. But the intent hung in the air. Shared bodies, shared risks, shared resilience. Rafael stood at the edge, suit for once perfectly unscuffed. The faint hum in his memory implant had become a familiar friend. On his best days, he thought he could almost tell when a bulkhead behind him was under stress. "You could take it out," Leina had once told him. "I don't want to," he'd replied. "It reminds me that my senses aren't just mine anymore." Leina watched the volunteers with her layered vision. Ultraviolet accents on Serathi skin, the thin halos of memory field lines, the subtle outline of Senseweave nodes on wrists and behind ears, all visible to her now. Pelix leaned on the rail nearby, older, taller, posture relaxed. Their eyes, once hers, now ringed with Serathi luminescent flecks, tracked the scene. "Feels familiar," Pelix said. "How?" Leina asked. "A room full of people deciding whether to give something they'll miss to someone they might never meet," Pelix said. "Except this time no one has to argue with elders about whether I'm still myself." Asera beside them let their tendrils rest lightly on Pelix's shoulder. Their bioluminescent patterns no longer flickered with shame when people glanced at their child. Leina closed her eyes for a moment. Through the senseweave around the plaza, she caught faint sensory echoes, an Alan's awareness of soft breeze shifts, a Yalori's precise depth sense, a Vemori's hum of magnetic lines. None of it overwhelmed her. None of it was forced. It was more like a hand rested on her shoulder. "I am here. I feel this. Know that it exists. Historians would catalog it all: the Giftbound Accord's clauses, the Emberwall sabotage, the first Gildshade cases on the rim. They would argue about turning points, about which decision had mattered most. Leina, Rafael, Pelix, and the others did not spend much time on such debates. They had work to do, more stations to train, more kids like Pelix to help through the first weeks with new senses, more suspicious elders to persuade, patiently or impatiently. Still, sometimes when the hubbub dimmed, Leina remembered the cramped trauma bay on Helix Spindle Hub, the blue stripe on the wall, the feel of Pelix's small hand gripping hers, desperate in the dark. That moment, more than any treaty or network, had cracked something open. One human deciding that her eyes were less precious than what someone else might see with them. The rest of the galaxy had simply followed that light, in its own messy, stubborn way.